for a few moments, he just came back.
Where am I? What happened?
As Mel.
Oh, okay. You're at UCLA, you were in a traffic accident. Oh, was anybody else hurt? No. The boy had a scratched knee, I see.
So wait just a sec here. When he said, what's up, Doc?
Mm-hmm.
Was that Mel Blanc talking, or was that Bugs Bunny inside Mel Blanc?
That's the question, and it's a question that actually came back again 23 years later.
Mr. Mel Blanc, this is your life.
On TV, on this show, This Is Your Life, which you've heard of, and they bring out a celebrity, and they take the celebrity's family and everybody they work with, and they say, like, hey, remember this and remember that.
Mel's funny voices used to drive our high school principal crazy.
And, it's all very light and airy and fun until...
At 8:29 p.m., January 24th, 1961, it all comes to a crashing halt.
They start talking about the car accident, and they call the doctor out to the stage.
Neurosurgeon Dr. Louis Conway.
Enter stage right to tell the whole coma story, and the host says, Doc, what did you think when this all happened?
I was astonished. Mel was dying, and it seemed as though Bugs Bunny was trying to save his life.
That is the idea that has survived more than any other part of this story. That's the thing that keeps coming back and back, and it's like, wait a second, like what?
What does it mean?
What does it mean? And it just presents all of these questions, like who is Mel really? Who is Bugs Bunny really? When you make somebody up, do they compete with you in some way?
Compete and win?
Right, exactly. Is that more deeply in Mel than Mel is?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
I brought Dr. Conway back to that moment.
It seemed as though Bugs Bunny was trying to save his life.
I don't remember saying that, but I may well have.
Do you think there's anything to that?
Well, I don't really know that Bugs Bunny was that skillful, but so I'd basically say not much to it, I don't think.
So I asked Noel.
It's an interesting headline, Bugs Bunny saves Mel. He didn't save his life, but he certainly got him out of the coma.
Then he told me something that does feed into the idea that these characters had minds of their own.
Well,
he says as a kid, he would watch his dad perform, and every time
he became those characters. I could turn the sound off in a booth where you couldn't hear him, just turn the speakers off, and watch him, and know exactly what character he was doing, because his whole body would metamorphosize to that character. He looked like Bugs Bunny when he was doing Bugs. He looked just like Yosemite Sam when he was doing Yosemite Sam. He became really small and timid when he was doing Tweety.
So he was sort of like a method actor.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, the way Noel described it, it was like these characters momentarily inhabited him.
So I think they were part of him, basically.
But still, what I don't get, though, is why would he respond to what's up, Bugs, rather than, like, what's up, Mel, or what's up, Dad, or what's up, Honey? You know what I mean?
That's a difficult question. I wish I could answer it.
Noel didn't really want to go there.
Anyway, what other questions do you have? You were stuck on that one, and I
kind of am stuck on it. And I know that it's not a question anybody can ultimately answer, but I called up this guy.
This is Warren Davinsky at NYU Medical Center.
A neurologist that we sometimes throw questions like this to, and I ran him through the whole scenario. This guy comes into the room and says, "Hi, Bugs Bunny, how are you doing today?" And he says, "What's up, Doc?"
Interesting.
So he batted around in his head for a while, and then he said, "Well, it might have something to do with cues, like getting the cues mixed up."
What do you mean?
Well, first of all,
being in a coma for a few weeks speaks to a very significant brain injury.
And what Orrin often sees with people who've had brain injuries like Mel's is that they lose the ability to read the cues that tell them who they're supposed to be when. Dad at home, boss at the office, Bugs in the studio, whatever.
Here's a man who no longer has his ability to differentiate social cues of right and wrong, of when to be Bugs Bunny and when not to be Bugs Bunny, where he is and where he isn't.
You have to keep in mind that when he was working, this is a guy who was getting cued all the time.
He was doing 18 radio shows a week at one time.
Wow.
So he'd just be running down the street from ABC to CBS to NBC, and they'd hand him script and he'd run on stage and do it.
I'm a private sack.
So he had those characters buried in himself that could come out, surface incredibly fast.
On a dime.
Yeah, here's the script, that's the character, boom.
So if he's got all these characters hanging around in his head,
This town ain't big enough for the two of us.
just waiting for the right cue. And in his head, that part of the brain that interprets the cues is all messed up.
Oh, no.
Maybe in a way, when Dr. Conway said,
Bugs Bunny, how are you doing today?
maybe the way Mel heard it was, hey Mel, you're on.
In his mind, I may have been the director at the time, for all I know.
Even the good doctor went along with this one.
It's as though he was given permission to talk now because it was his time to talk, sort of thing.
So, on one level, it's obviously crazy to think that Bugs Bunny saved his life because, after all, he was just a cartoon character. But whether or not those characters saved him, I mean, in that moment, they were the most essential part of him, you could say. Because when the rest of Mel was adrift and sort of lost in the ether, Bugs was there. He was ready to go to work, which makes perfect sense to Orrin Devinsky.
I mean, that was a rehearsed thing that he did. Once you practice things long enough, they kind of become automatic in lower portions of the brain. And that's why when the higher brain's injured, sometimes these lower brain functions can come out so beautifully because they have been kind of wired in over time. So the Bugs Bunny voice was perfectly preserved deep inside.
Bugs Bunny is like crystallized and kept over here in a protective jar away from the rattling cage of the brain.
Exactly. He went down into the safe.
So what ended up happening to Mel?
Well, he took a long time to recover.
And was in a body cast for, 7 months.
But he worked the entire time. He never stopped working.
Right. Let's go, Fred.
They're bringing the equipment to him.
I brought the equipment in, dangled a mic over the bed, and he started to work there.
Let's go.
In fact, the first 65 Flintstones.
You would never know this. Barney, in real life,
What's on your mind, Barney? I'm kind of busy.
was flat on his back in a body cast.
Just passing by on my way to see the doctor. The doctor? What's the matter with you, Barney boy?
And then in 1989, for the first time, Noel and Mel both were starring in this commercial for Oldsmobile. Mel's 81 in the shtick. They did a bunch of these. The shtick was, not your father's Oldsmobile.
We did the commercial. It took us all day to do it. And he had just gotten over the flu, so he wasn't feeling that great. And I says, Dad, why don't you run over to the doctor? So he goes over to the doctor, and I call the doctor. I says, what's the story? He says, well, he's okay, he's fine. I can give him a shot and send him home, but I'd love to clear his lungs out. So why don't we just put him in the hospital overnight, clear his lungs out, and then send him home? So I talked to my dad. I says, you want to do that? He says, well, okay, what the heck. I'll see you in the morning, Pop. Oh, yeah. Got there the next morning about 7:30. I says, how do you feel? He says, my leg hurts. He says, why? The nurses at the hospital forgot to put up the bed rails on the side of the bed. Well, you know how high a hospital bed is. He had fallen out of the bed and broken his femur. Fat emboli got into the brain by that time, and within 48 hours, he was basically almost brain dead. Yeah. During the next couple of days, he'd come in and out of his coma, or in and out of his sleep. And I tried to rouse him with the characters like the doctor had 30 years earlier.
You would?
Yeah.
Bugs, are you in there?
Yeah. It was very difficult at that time because he's 30 years older now. He's 81 years old. And it was difficult to revive him after each time that he would fall back to sleep again.
And just before his dad passed away, Noel says that Mel looked at him, and in the voice of
Yosemite Sam,
he said,
"No, I love you." That was about it.
Oh my God.
It was the last character he did. And the last character on film, or recorded character,
which was in that Oldsmobile ad I told you about,
was Porky saying, "That's all, folks."
And that's what his tombstone says, too. That's all, folks.
Wow.
Thank you, Sean Cole.
Sean does some good voices himself, you know.
He does, but we won't share them with you. Not in the company of Mr. Mel Blanc.
Very, very big thanks to Noel Blanc, Mel Blanc's son.
And to Dr. Lewis Conway, the doctor.
And to Robert's boyfriend, Oren Davinsky. It's an inside joke.
I do like Oren.
Oh, and a huge thanks to Mel Blanc himself, wherever he may be, for all those voices that populated our youth.
The that's all, folks.
Radiolab will continue in a moment.
My name is Carl Hancock, and I'm from Salt Lake City, Utah. Support for NPR comes from NPR stations and the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, committed to building a more just, verdant, and peaceful world. More information at macfound.org. The Melville Charitable Trust, supporting solutions to prevent and end homelessness.